First of all, thank you all very much for coming, and thanks to the Brink Lounge, Kurt Brink and Matt Brink. Thank you so much for your generous hospitality. And I want to encourage all of you, if you haven't already, please buy yourself a drink and feel free to stay afterward for the Madison Jazz Orchestra. Also, I'd like to recognize my co-hosts in this event. I'm Nikki Anderson. I'm owner of Change Boutique, and I'm the president of the Greater Williamson Area Business Association. This is my colleague Megan Blake Horst. She's the owner of Mad City Bazaar and Absolutely Art, and she's representing the Atwood Winnebago Area Business Association. Then we're joined by Nate Mathis Vargas, owner of Doghouse University, and he's representing the Capital East Business Association, which includes the Johnston Street area businesses. Okay. And I want to thank the candidates for coming and giving us this chance so we can learn more about your positions regarding the issues that concern us most as small business owners on the east side of town. And just a quick overview of how we're going to structure the evening. Please silence your cell phones if you haven't already. We intend for this to be really informal and casual. We try to accomplish that by the way we set the stage and so forth. So my nervousness probably isn't convincing you that we are going for casual, but we really are. Anyway, restrooms are back to the corner there. Feel free to come and go and get drinks as you feel. Given that we're trying to be laid back in East Side, we've asked the candidates if they're comfortable being referred to by their first names, and they've both graciously agreed. So that's how we'll be rolling that. Then we're going to go with a total of 7 questions. The questions were identified by a committee with representatives from each of the 3 business associations, and the members were also, we solicited feedback from our membership. So we're going to, best use of time, we've budgeted certain amounts of time for each question. So we have 3 minutes for each response, and then the candidate that started will have a 1-minute opportunity for a rebuttal. But again, because we are laid back in East Side, if there's a natural dialogue that's going on, we will allow for the opportunity for another rebuttal from the other candidate so that we don't want to shut down a good discourse. Let's see here. We're going to reserve 2 minutes at the end for closing remarks from each candidate, and we are going to start with 3 minutes for introductions from each candidate. So, shall I hand it over to Megan?
I guess we'll actually hand it over to the candidates. So Paul is going to have the opportunity to do his introduction first, followed by Scott. So take it away.
I've got one quick question, which is, where's the 3-minute signals?
Good question.
The art system here. I do not trust technology at all, so we will not be using the phone. So orange represents 3 minutes. So I will flip this, and then I will hold up to signal you when there's 1 minute left. I'll raise the orange.
Thank you. So I should start? Okay, thank you. Madison, as you know, is a very special place. And in the last several years, we've done exceedingly well in a number of areas that are statistically measured regarding livability within our community. We continue to set all kinds of standards regarding unemployment, quality of life, in terms of recreational and cultural opportunities, certainly in regards to business startups where we've really made advancements in the last 2 years. The enjoyment of the benefits of living in Madison are not shared by all the community's residents. And if we look historically at the situation, we were doing fairly well up until the recession. Once we hit the recession, what we saw was the old adage regarding last hired and first fired. And at that point, enormous gaps began to occur in regards to income levels, rates of poverty for children in our schools. And as someone who served in this office before, I well recognize several things. First, in 2011, that we had challenges of poverty and equity. Now, this was denied by a lot of my critics who said that Madison was a great place for everyone. Well, here we are, and now with the Reach to Equity Report for 2013, which looked at the data from 2011, it's come to be recognized that we've got these very significant challenges. And that's something we went to work on as soon as I'd taken office. And basically, I would hope that we will continue in the direction we've undertaken since 2011, and going into the future, continue to close some of these gaps. In regards to the function of the mayor's office and the role of the mayor, I do want to look at the school district. We've engaged in a number of collaborative efforts with the district, showing that working together we can make a difference for the youth of this community. And while we tend to the assignments of city responsibilities, there's really nothing as important to the well-being of everyone in the city of Madison as to what happens in our schools. So as we go through this campaign, I'm hoping we can explore those issues, explore issues of equity, how we've responded in the past, and set up systems, not services, but sophisticated systems that we know work to to address the challenge of these problems. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Scott?
Yes, thank you so much for being out here today. I think to myself which room I'm more comfortable in is probably high-tech happy hour, simply because I'm a small business owner. I'm someone who started a tech company about 7 years ago and employs 22 people here in Madison. And I see how great our community is. Now, I take a look at our community and we are truly at a turning point. And the decisions that we're making today and tomorrow are going to dictate what the future of this community not only looks like, but who we interact with, and how prosperity is shared amongst everyone in this city. And I look at the reasons why the city of Madison has reached this critical point. We look at what EPIC has done for our community. We look at what small businesses, creative businesses have been able to flourish inside our city. And we look at it as Madison's no longer a boomerang town. It's not a city that you leave to come back to. It's now a city, a destination for so many residents. The city of Madison, though, has challenges. Many people are concerned with the influx of new individuals. What does this do to our quality of life? What does the fabric of our community look like? How does it feel like when we have more individuals living in the dense isthmus? We also look at our challenges. We look at the things that threaten our community. We look at the cuts from the governor's office to our public school system and our university system. We look at our increased issues with homelessness and how we address that within our city. We look at the racial disparities that we've been discussing well before I ever returned here. We came here from the 1980s, 1990s, 2000s, and still today. And I look at what City Hall can do to address those issues. How we can be an innovative community, how we can be an innovative City Hall, and how we can look forward to the best practices, leveraging the needs and issues from the entire UW system, our community leaders. I'm going to move away from that just for a little bit here. And see how we can come together as a community to address the greater needs for our city. I'm here to say, and when it was time, when I decided to run for mayor, we saw my colleagues come out to support me. 7 city council members, which is more than any other candidate in this race, because they know how I work. They know that I'm someone who listens, that works together, and even those individuals who I frequently vote against decided that after working with both the mayor and myself, were here to support me in this endeavor. So I look at this and say, how do we listen to our neighbors? How do we work together? How do we outline strategies to address the problems in our community and hold ourselves accountable for where we're going in the future? I believe Madison can do better by investing in public services, by investing in community places, by investing in strong transportation networks that benefit every resident of our community to make it a great place.
Thank you very much for both of your introductions and starting us off on a great note. I really appreciate it. So our first question is going to go to you, Paul, to start off with, and then you'll have 3 minutes, and then Scott, you can follow up with 3 minutes with that 1 minute rebuttal. So here on the Near East Side, we are very proud of our locally owned and operated businesses. With the surge of mixed-use development in the East Washington corridor and within the Isthmus, what can the city do to continue the precedent of prioritizing local businesses here in Madison?
You've probably noticed that in the last couple of years, I've placed a great deal of emphasis on local businesses and the advantages that they bring to a community. It's not just if the entrepreneur is successful and remains in Madison that we build jobs and that we build contributing tax base to the city of Madison. It's also their participation in civic engagement. It is also, and this is really critical, the commitment to keeping the business local, not leaving, not becoming a runaway plant. Now, a couple of things that can be done in terms of addressing this matter. First, I want to address something that we put into this year's budget, and that is the $1 million, which is the commitment for worker-owned cooperatives. This is a new venture building on Madison's tradition of cooperative movements and are having so many credit unions. It is an effort to build on the success of the Willie Street Co-op, to build on the success of Union Cab, to build on the success of Isthmus Engineering, all companies that are cooperatives where we don't have to worry about an individual owner selling the company, taking off, and the buyer disappearing with the intellectual property. That's one of the critical things we have to worry about in Madison. Now, to make life better for locally owned businesses, we've got certain elements that we can use regarding zoning and regarding design requirements. One of the beauties of State Street and Williamson Street and Monroe Street and similar local community-based shopping districts is the assortment of different buildings which fortunately do not make for a footprint acceptable to national chains. That's one of the unique things that comes to our community. In addition to that, we have design elements that we can work with. So if you review the options, we've got funding, we've got design, we have zoning, and in addition, we have a really vital economic development department in the city, which is available to provide technical assistance and to provide connections from business people, from cooperatives, to lenders, and those who are more experienced than the person first starting into the marketplace.
Thank you. And Scott, it's you.
Yeah, and Paul hits on a number of the key elements as a member of the Plan Commission that I've been a part of. When we talk about deciding whether a project moves forward or not based on the zoning, based on the footprint of a first floor plan, making sure that it has the proper entrances and exits, making sure that it entitles people to have a small, locally run business, but make sure it's not overpriced to make sure that someone can ensure that be in a given location. Now, I look at an organization that I was lucky enough to start, a group called Capital Entrepreneurs. And we created Capital Entrepreneurs with the mentality of if you have a business network where you can go to, you can struggle through issues together, you can talk about your problems, and in a collective voice bring forward issues that are important to local entrepreneurs, you can have success. It's why organizations like this, why others in DMI and others on State Street and Monroe Street and other business associations have success, is it's by listening to your thoughts and saying, how do we ensure that local businesses thrive in our community. I'm very excited to be part of that in the tech community, and know when there's an issue that's raised, an issue that's brought up, it's for City Hall to listen and to react to those concerns. I'm very excited about local businesses. As someone who's decided, instead of moving my company to San Francisco or New York or Chicago, I made the decision to stay right here. And I know it's the important elements of making sure that there's local products that make Madison a great place to live.
And 1 minute to you.
Why don't we move on?
All right. We will move on then. So my second question I have this evening, as some of you might have noticed on your way in here, finding some challenges, finding a place to park. Here on the Near East Side, there's been a lot of discussion about parking in this area and the lack thereof being a limiting factor for business growth. Do you believe that that construction of a parking ramp for public use in this area would be a positive step? And if so, what would you do to build or incentivize a parking structure in this area? And Scott, this question goes to you first.
And I would assume the mayor and I are going to agree on this, but we'll see where it goes. I believe that parking is critical, and particularly structured parking in the Capitol East Gateway. When you think about the parking concerns, not only here, but what stresses we have living on an isthmus and in our town, we have reached a critical mass where it makes sense to have structured parking right here downtown, or right here on the isthmus. I look at investments that right now that I'm looking to make as a nonprofit starting block. And what this organization will be is a 55,000 square foot center that combines areas of new manufacturing, new job creation right here in our downtown. And it's the critical piece to it was making sure that we have all modes of transportation. Bicycling, car sharing, but critically to that is parking. Making sure that someone could park on the Near East Isthmus and find a bus to take them to a downtown destination in rapid time. I think it's views about where our city is going in the direction. I was encouraged in the executive budget to seeing studies on that area, and I'll be very excited to bring more parking into this part of town.
Thank you, and to you, Paul.
The question is not so much whether or not we support parking. Both of us do. The real question is who's got the capability to deal with the complicated nature of working with different groups, different governments, different organizations to make it happen. The State Street Mall wasn't easy. The Capitol Concourse, the Civic Center, which grew into Overture. Certainly 50 years of struggle, and we did in Monona Terrace. When I came back into office in 2011, we had the worst vacancy rate in the United States out of the 100 largest cities. Since that time, we have changed that vacancy rate and almost doubled it, though we are far from our objective of 5%, which is a balanced market. But there's now close to 5,000 units of new housing, which has either been completed or under construction. When I came into office, there was dreams about Capitol East. The city had acquired the Don Miller property. The city had acquired Union Corners. Well, one portion of Don Miller is under construction. Another portion of Don Miller is completed. The third portion of Don Miller will hopefully be the site where we put the $1.5 million that I recommended in the capital budget for starting block, and which got the unanimous support of the City Council. The point is creating the parking. And by the way, this parking would not be possible if we didn't have new state legislation which allows municipalities to use TIF money towards construction of a ramp. And there's not a lot of mayors around this state who can say that they successfully were able to get anything out of that state legislature in the last 4 years that was really constructive and truly conducive to economic development, while they're running around undermining the vitality of the state with right to work and tax cuts, which are not how you build a sound economy. A sound economy is built through investment in education and investment in appropriate infrastructure, such as the ramp, which would serve this very vital area.
Thank you very much. Scott, 1 minute too?
We're in agreement here.
All right. So we move on to question number three.
This one, I was hoping for a little more detail in response to this one, just because I know a lot of our members this was a kind of a big question about getting some specifics. If we could just allow a minute each, if you could tell us, given Breeze Stevens and Central Park, where you would perhaps propose a parking structure would be sited?
Well, we're understudy now, looking at a number of sites. We think that the best sites are about 2 blocks from where we are. Well, no, a block from where we are now to 2 blocks to the east, and maybe 1 block or so in off of Main Street.
Thank you. Scott, did you want to hit on that at all from your perspective?
You know, the only thing that I would say is when we're studying the different parcels, you know, we could have also looked at the water utility site. And I look at that as also an area, now if we're able to find something either with MG&E or other parcels in place, when it comes to the eventual parking, we shouldn't close the door until we have a location found. We tried introducing that at the council level. I was shot down. I'll let that one go as we do redevelop the water utility site. But it does come back to working with the private developers as well to make sure that we have the parking, to make sure that each one of these focuses are ensured. When we have now more concerts and more events on Breeze Stevens Field, as we've made a major investment into that location, is making sure that we have parking. As Central Park becomes more and more of a struggle, as residents are coming back with concerns of where do we park during these events, it all comes back to parking, but it's in making sure that we also have multimodal opportunities in those areas.
Great, thank you very much for elaborating on that. Paul, this question goes to you first. There's been an ongoing discussion about the need for more retail in the downtown area in the Cab East District. Please explain your position on the retail development and the future of the downtown area.
Sure. And what I'm about to say, to a certain degree, applies again to Williamson Street, the Norris Court area, Monroe Street, Cottage Grove Road, where we're doing some exciting things, and South Park Street. Let's start with the focus on State Street and the Square. Bottom line is this: the public has invested $100 million to make this a vital space. When we did that, I don't think we had in mind a 7-Eleven at the corner of State and Lake. Now, I warned a couple of years ago that this was an unfortunate trend. We got pushback from some of the business organizations who were in denial, but there's no question that we have seen a significant shift as establishments that sell liquor are taking over the retail space. Now, one of the advantages we have to hopefully getting more retail into these areas is that as we have greater density for residents, that will create the demand. Now, I want to just do a little side comment here. Scott's criticized me that I haven't done listening sessions with the residents of State Street on this particular issue. I've been listening for 4 years. I've been listening for 40 years. And it's very clear what the residents want. They want clothing, they want books, they want household goods, They want food. It's been very clear that that's what the residents who live in these areas want. And what's our obligation is to address this issue and figure out how we're going to use zoning, how we are going to use the management of space to create an environment that is not 7-Eleven stores and not CVS stores and specific chains that you can see anywhere in any suburban mall, but the ones that are hopefully more likely to be locally owned and are going to provide the needs of the people who live here. When somebody goes to the farmer's market on a Saturday morning and then walks down State Street, if they are encountering chain after chain after chain, we're going to have a problem. It started on Willie Street. In 1973, Taco John tried to locate on Willie Street. The area businesses and residents rebelled. There's now a park there. That's how that park came to be. And that may not be the solution everywhere, but it was better than a Taco John.
Thank you. Scott, to you?
When it comes to things like a 7-Eleven on State Street, we are equally as outraged. Well, what I would say is that it has to be driven. Conversations about what the needs are of a given location need to be driven by those residents who live in the area, are shopping at those businesses, and are regularly participating in the business's success. What is going on in State Street, and I will still reiterate the point, the young professionals, like myself and my wife who live down there, are not being listened to. We are seeing threats of moratoriums on bars, as that would be an answer over a 1 to 2 year period of shifting the area of State Street. We're talking about retail goods in a way and threats of mega saloons. I still am trying to figure out what is a mega saloon and which one has opened up in the last 2 to 3 years, because as a resident of State Street, I haven't seen it. But what I have seen on State Street is new investment. I've seen it as an area now with new restaurants, a vitality, a certain energy that I have not seen in any of my other, easily the last 5 years. Now there are pressures and there are concerns with that new development. There are concerns not only from those who live there, but those residents who have always enjoyed many traditional businesses that are having a decent amount of stress. I think right now when we look at zoning as one area of approach, I think it's a good idea. But furthermore, we need to make sure that we bring everybody to the table to say, what is the future of this plan? And in that regard, I'm glad that we're having the planning process, but we can't pre-subscribe to say we know all of the answers before the planning process begins, because we don't know what that outcome's going to be, and I'm looking forward to that conversation.
Thank you. Did you want to finish any other thoughts?
I do. Let's make ourselves well clear of the issue. State Street has dropped from 70% retail to 40% retail. That replacement is basically liquor and in some instances food. They can afford, and this comes straight from property owners on State Street, they can afford to pay higher rents for that space than can dry good retailers, for example. That is what is happening. That's the economics of it. What I have asked is a moratorium on liquor licenses, and that any space that was previously non-liquor not become liquor until we can spend the next year or two. But I'm afraid that we're getting to a tipping point where we are going to lose the essence of the street and what makes it interesting, because when you take a stroll down there during the day with your friends and relatives, the visitors, are you going to walk past one bar after another and, like missing teeth in a smile, eventually get to one retailer, and if we lose the dynamics of enough retailers, we're going to lose the rest of them.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. And Scott, I would like to continue this dialogue on this question. It seems like it's going in a positive direction, so we'll give you 1 minute.
I think this is a good conversation to have. The 70 to 40% drop also has an impact. It's called the internet. And you take a look at how Amazon and other organizations have played a new role in how all of us shop and interact, impact businesses. Now, what we also see is still a number of locally owned businesses on State Street. 80 to 85% have still maintained as locally owned establishments, and just like everything else, we see areas of our city that are going to be undergoing change. Now, I don't want to see retail establishments gone by any means. I think that we still can have a great mix, and as you see the market demands of the almost 2,000 new units that we're bringing online in the general vicinity, you're going to see the market respond to that. You're going to see local entrepreneurs stepping up to take care of that business. I think that right now we are going to see a State Street that's going to be changing. We're going to see an isthmus that's going to be changing. It's understanding the needs of business owners and seeing what that direction is.
Thank you. I appreciate that dialogue. So our next question, Scott, it's going to start with you from our back and forth here. Storefront signage is critical for generating traffic for retail businesses. And what is your position on the city's role in regulating business signage? And do you feel the current sign ordinance is effectively balancing the needs of both the city and the business community?
There's a lot of issues that I have run into as a State Street alder. I've heard issues of noise, I've heard issues of crime, of pollution, environmental issues. The one issue that I haven't heard is signage. And the reason being is you take a look at the mom and pops that we're trying to support here in Madison. You're taking a look at those local retailers and the way you support that local retailer who may not have the budget to go online, may not have the budget to go on TV to advertise their product, is a strong, creative sign. And you take a look at the regulations that we're putting under small business owners when it comes to signage, and I don't see this as being the top issue that our city should be facing. I take a look at this as seeing as more of a distraction. I believe we do have a UDC, an Urban Design Commission, or Urban Design Committee that can take care of these matters, but we've had too much focus in City Hall right now, focused on signs. That historic sign from the 1950s that we all love, I can't imagine that being approved in Madison today. And I think we need to be looking at it. If we're going to support local retail, it's figuring out all ways we can support local retail, and that means being creative with signage.
Thank you. Paul?
I guess we've got a real different view of the matter. The question of signage is a question of public safety in some instances. Let's understand that. But first, let's go back for a moment. The 1950 sign that you're talking about is probably welcome today. It is new signage that is in violation of the law that's creating the challenge. That is why we are trying to rewrite the zoning code as it applies to signs so that we can accommodate some of the new needs and at the same time deal with a couple of aesthetic issues. I don't think it's unreasonable for a city that puts hundreds of thousands of dollars into grants for facade restoration to preserve the nature, the historic nature of the building. I don't think it's unreasonable for that municipality to ask for compliance in the sign ordinance. Now, the sign ordinance covers a number of things. It covers the sign that goes across the top of the storefront. It covers the signs that go in the windows. It covers the signs that go alongside the finished part, the facade of the building. It covers the signs that go in the sidewalk. Now let's deal with some of these issues and let's look at what we're talking about. If it's a A-frame sign that's in the right-of-way, it can oftentimes create a hazard for blind individuals, individuals in wheelchairs, parents with strollers. That's why that is regulated. But there are some other options which we're trying to create, such as greater flexibility in using blade signs, which are also visible to the approaching pedestrian, but now is elevated and can be more clearly seen than the illegal sidewalk sign. Another thing we're doing is addressing the demands of restaurants. Yes, the restaurants are there, and yes, I want to work with them, who want the ability to place menus in their windows. And that's another accommodation we're making. A third accommodation that we're making to deal with the challenge of signs has to do with new materials, showing more flexibility in that regard. So when we start talking about the sign ordinance, we're at the one time dealing with some of the safety issues, but at the same time responding to more modern challenges that we're facing.
Thank you. 1 minute to you, Scott.
It's about the approach of the problem. And I don't necessarily disagree with the mayor on many of the issues that he brings up. But is it the business owners that you're reaching out to first when you have an issue? Many times and on many occasions, and I'm running into this in my own district on an A-frame sign of a business owner who thought had something approved by the city back in 2005 and now being questioned about it today. Most local business owners don't purposely try to skirt the law. They're trying to be good citizens, good stewards of their business, and operating within the rules and regulations of the city. But when we come about signage, and we start out by saying, who could we have spoken to on day one to make sure this isn't a controversial issue? Who could we have brought to around the table to have these conversations before we have blow-up fights? The part of this that I'm disappointed with is we could have had this conversation in a proactive way to figure out what the best signage package is for the city, instead of first trying to hand out tickets and then...
Would you like 1 more minute?
Yeah, I would.
Thank you.
We are working with the Chamber of Commerce. We're working with other business organizations in the city to develop the new proposed sign ordinance. Now, you may think it's not necessary to deal with these issues, but particularly when we've got signs that encroach in the public right-of-way and create a safety hazard and disrespect the disabled community, I think we have a rightful expectation of the owners of these properties to follow the law, and they have an obligation to work with us to reform the ordinance rather than taking the law into their own hands.
Thank you. Hopefully you will have continued time at other debates to continue on this conversation, but we're going to move on to question number 5. Road construction, as many of us have been through, is disruptive to businesses and residents alike, especially to storefront retailers. What can you do, or what can the city do to make road construction projects least disruptive to businesses? And this question is going to go to you first, Paul.
It seems to me that some of the tasks we took in the last several years in dealing with both the construction on Williamson Street as well as the rebuilding of Johnson give us some indications as to what we can do, along with some other planning issues. Okay, item number 1. We're back to signage. Creating signs on the more heavily trafficked streets that are now absorbing that traffic, directing people to those businesses and those merchants. Secondly, dealing with publicity, as we did, press events, trying to get the media to give a great deal of attention to the fact that these streets are open for business, and we've got a lot of local people who are dependent upon the robust nature of these businesses, and that it would be a nice gesture to make a concerted effort to shop. The mayor's role. In both instances, I participated with local residents and businesses in walks the full length of the street, and not Williamson Street, we missed the block, I think. But in any case, most of the length of the street, stopping in, making shopping efforts, and saying hello to the merchants, and again, working with particularly television to get a good visual on it. Another element that came into that was Sarah and my own pledges to regularly shop on those streets, which Sarah pretty much took care of on her own on Willie Street with Vinnie's there. Another thing that's very critical, and this is something that came up in the discussion about Monroe Street, and unfortunately a number of members of the council opposed this, is to make sure that you're not doing multiple constructions at the same time. The state scheduled for this coming summer some reconstruction of the Beltline. And there was some effort by some members of the city council to simultaneously rebuild Monroe Street. Well, with the construction this summer on the Beltline, you can just imagine what would have happened if we had compounded the problem with Monroe Street, because as you work from the Beltline in towards the university in Lake Mendota, figure out how many streets we have that carry you from the square to the west side. It's pretty much University Avenue, Regent Street, and Monroe Street. To have lost that capacity would have been unacceptable.
Thank you. Scott, to you, please.
I'll add to some of what the mayor has said. Partly, as we talk about Monroe Street decision, one of the most important factors in any way City Hall is dealing with businesses is predictability. It's the one single word that may mean more than anything else to a business. It's not whether you get everything that you want or not, it's whether it's a predictable and to a fair process. And when it comes to Monroe Street, I'm a local business owner. It's about preparedness. And when something is going to happen, a 10-year event such as road construction, you know you need to put a little more in the bank, you know you need to put off certain investments, something that you might make a decision this summer, you put off till next summer. So on Monroe Street, when you have businesses that have been preparing for a development project to be moving forward, to say, no, we're going to be putting it off another year, I thought it wasn't the right decision. I listened to the alder who represented that area and said, all right, I'll follow you along on this track. The rest of the council didn't agree. It's also not my district. What I will say, furthermore there, is also what type of alder in the mayor's office role is with each individual contractor. You know, when you have great representation like you do have in the 6th district and then recently with Turn-On Johnson and the 2nd district, it's making sure that the contractor is living up to their expectations, that they make sure that businesses are open, there's not flooding in the front doorsteps, and there's an easy access way forward. All of those pieces, road construction's always difficult, but businesses are able to persevere.
Thank you. Scott, Paul, did you want to follow up with anything on that?
Stuff happens. And if you want to be mayor, you got to deal with it. And so when the state of Wisconsin makes a decision to rebuild a portion of the Beltline, the summer of 2015, and the city council had previously tampered with the construction timetable for Monroe Street and moved it up to 2015. Someone has got to take responsibility to tackle the issue and make a rational, intelligent decision. And when you weigh all the values, you tell me, was a decision by the council to move up Monroe Street to 2015 to be kept, or were we to deal with the reality of what would happen on the west side with construction on the Beltline and
That's
construction on Monroe Street?
Thank you. It seems we could continue this discourse on this question a little bit longer, but I'm going to move on to question number 6. And this goes to you, Scott, first. For most casual observers, and this has already come up in our conversation a little bit earlier this evening, but for most casual observers, the city's TIF policy and even what that means can be confusing. Can you provide one example where TIF was used well, and one where TIF was inappropriately applied?
Used well, I look at University Square where we made a $3 million TIF investment, which catalyzed $100 million in new investments in our downtown, in new investments in student housing, and new investments in the region. I know the answer that the mayor is going to give on TIF projects that did not work well, as we talk about the Edgewater, I'm sure, very shortly here. But TIF, as you look and you review what projects work well or not, you look at it in a 20-year time frame. It's, did we make the investments that we needed to make? Did we put the right energy behind a TIF district? And we look at TIF districts that are still failing to this day. On the north side of town, there's more that we can do. I do absolutely treasure a lot of the value judgments that we've had in the city of Madison, where we don't have many failing TIF districts. That are decisions, there have been prudent decisions made by not just this mayor, but previous administrations, and then the rebuttal will talk about the Edgewater.
All right, Scott, or Paul, to you.
TIF in 2 minutes. TIF is complicated. What you have to look at is what is the commitment of the public sector, what is the risk, what is the return. And this is something beyond the TIF itself, but what kind of additional construction and investment will it spur? TIF 25, I believe was the number, Block 87, throws off about $25 million within a few years of the initial project. The troublesome TIFs, and every TIF I have done as mayor has worked. The troublesome TIFs were done basically betting on the future without an anchor that would return the investment. Unfortunately, they were put into place at the time that the real estate recession started. They're underwater, and those of us in office now have to deal with them. But you've got to make a judgment. You've got to look at the reports, and you have to have the skill and the wisdom and look at a report that says this TIF is no more valued than $3.7 million. For the but-for test, the developer can do it and only needs $3.7 million. And so as mayor, I came to the conclusion that that was the appropriate number, not 16.7, made that recommendation to the council, and fortunately, there wasn't an 11th vote to go with Scott's to vote the 16.7 million, and so consequently, this city saved $17 million and still got the Edgewater.
Thank you, Scott. Do you want to follow up on that?
when you look at a decision and you see 20/20 hindsight, it makes matters a lot easier. If we knew on the city council that Jerry and Pleasant were going to make another major investment into our city and into our community, we would have moved forward to say, yeah, here's the 3.3, 3.7 that we were talking about. I made a decision to vote for that project as a continuation motion. What the mayor could have done in that regard is could have created a chilling effect to any other person coming in to a development project in the city of Madison and saying every single cycle your project may be canned. Now I felt, and I still stand by that decision with the information we knew at the time. I'm glad the Edgewater opened, and I think that we need to learn from where we go from here on this.
And did you, Paul, have anything else to finish up on that?
You didn't need hindsight. The numbers were there. It doesn't matter where the financing came from. All the developer needed at a maximum was under $4 million. And that's been verified, and it was in the reports before the vote.
Thank you for that back and forth. We are on to our final question of the evening. So here we go, and this will go to you first, Paul, for tonight. Despite the city's expressed desire for small business growth and development, entrepreneurs and prospective businesses often indicate that there are significant barriers to creating and doing business here in the Madison area. What can you specifically propose to change the process and culture in City Hall to make it more business-friendly and attractive to those prospective businesses?
Significant barriers. How long are we going to put up with this? This city is growing like no other city in the state of Wisconsin. I'm sorry, whether you go to Dubuque, you go to Boise, you go to San Francisco, you go to New York, there are going to be projects that are going to go through delays, and sometimes they're going to be turned down. This city has had record success over the last 4 years, and I don't know why people keep beating up a city that can approve Ovation, approve the Hub, approve what led to close to 5,000 housing units, mixed-use developments, commercial office buildings, and in light of the changes, look what we did. This city was slowed down and hampered by an application process that didn't work. We fixed that. We turned around, and because preceding administrations and councils were afraid to deal with the challenges, the butting of heads that was coming with the zoning code rewrite and with the downtown plan, it just sat there. We inherited that. But we brought people together. We brought disparate interests, people who wanted to invest, build big buildings, people who were concerned about landmarks and historic preservation and our past. And we got through those ordinances and those modifications and got them adopted. We had a plan commission and a landmarks commission and an urban design commission that were out of step and feuding with one another. And you want to know something? They still have disagreements today. But the point is, we made substantial changes, we made improvements, we listened to the issues of the developers, we listened to the design community, we listened to the neighborhoods. And we've got something that's flowing. And you want to know what we're doing? We're planning doing a checking. We are reviewing those changes now to see what we missed. And by the way, some of the things we missed involve signage. And we're going forward with a series of recommendations to further improve the process. But I'm getting a little tired of this beating up on Madison when you look at all the investments, when 7-Eleven wants to be here, when CVS wants to be here, when outfits from Chicago are partnering with Mullins on projects like the Hub, and then turning around and they're already underway with Hub 2. What happened with Hub D? Came in, do the Ovation, and now they're moving forward with the AT&T building. Let's look at the facts. We have changed. We are better for it, and we will continue to improve.
Thank you. Scott, to you.
Yeah, you know, I'll first start talking about the conversation that we're going to have here. The mayor mentions the hub and the hub 2. And you want to talk about the issues on State Street, some of the issues what happens when we're looking at going too fast, some of the votes that I could look back on and say things that I might regret. The hub is one of those decisions I may regret, because you take a look at what kind of projects right now are going in that central part of campus, causing students to not only not be able to afford to live in our downtown, but now we have an out-of-state developer who has said, before the building's even open, as it sits at a shaky level of capacity, we need to build the hub 2. It makes me really question a number of the decisions that we're making right now. Now, when it comes down to, when we talk about some of the plans that we've created, you know, we made it through the downtown plan. We have 184, 192 recommendations. It's a number of them where you could read the plan where it says everything is approved and nothing new is approved. We have plans and zoning that, yes, we still have conflicts with, but when it comes back to the issue of culture inside City Hall and ensuring the person who's making a recommendation that impacts your final line, your business line, whether your business may open or close, how a permit is issued or not, it's ensuring that that person understands and can relate to the decision that they're putting upon you. This is critical when we talk about the culture of City Hall. It's why roundtables are important. It's why communication is important. Now, yes, we are seeing a level of unprecedented development in Madison. Quite a bit of that we should thank Epic for. But otherwise, we still can look for where are our opportunities to improve this relationship. And I look forward to having those conversations as mayor.
Did you have anything else to follow up with that? And I
have a lot to say.
I would like to ask too if you could also focus it on small businesses. Those are all larger corporations and businesses that you were referring to, and we have a lot of small business owners in this audience tonight. So if you could focus it a little bit more on small businesses, that would be great.
Okay, so Madison had a 1.25% vacancy rate. As I said, the worst in the country. We're now close to 2.5%. Since World War II and the GIs returned to go to college on the GI Bill, Madison has continually learned that the way to solve the housing problem is to add to the housing stock. Just because you build something that's for someone, for a property that's beyond your price point, as long as we get to a balanced vacancy rate, that helps everyone. It helps the entire marketplace. It helps students. It helps people who are interested in affordable housing. And let me say, we are also on track with a $25 million commitment over the next 4 or 5 years to build over 1,000 units of affordable housing. Let's go back to the hub. We spoke to the owners of the hub. We emphasized the importance of, pardon?
We're not talking about these businesses. This is Lava. We're sponsoring this for the Near East Side businesses. Do you get it?
Excuse us. We're going to let him finish his statement, please, and we'll give you 1 more minute to finish that up.
There was an option of creating one giant space in the ground floor of the hub, which one national retailer could come in, or of dividing it into smaller spaces, which would then be more competitive for small businesses. That's the work we did in cooperation with the developer for this site.
Thank you. We'll give you, Scott, 1 minute to talk about that topic.
Well, as it relates to small businesses, when it comes to City Hall, it means making sure that the permitting process is streamlined and make sure that if there's snow removal or other issues that are responsibility of the city, that they're responding in an efficient manner and an effective manner. When it comes to things like parking enforcement, or you're having other issues where only the city of Madison can jump in and get involved, it's important. I deal with the same thing on Gilman Street right now where my business is, where we have limited parking spaces, and at times we need parking enforcement, and that becomes the issue that my small business deals with in the city. It's being reactive, it's communicating regularly, and it's making sure that small businesses have a place in City Hall and are listened to.
Thank you. That concluded our question and answer session, but we do want to give an extra minute to each candidate for their closing remarks in case there were some questions that you didn't feel you got to completely answer. So if you need or want the extra minute, please take it. And I thank you. So who starts with their closing remarks?
Okay. Madison is a great place with a number of opportunities. You see how wonderful it is, even in this space right here that wasn't here 15 years ago in the same capacity. You see the new businesses that are opening. Those business owners is an investment in your community. I'm excited to be part of this. I'm excited to come with it with a fresh perspective and simply just to listen. I don't have all of the answers, and I don't think no one person can. But when it comes back to it, the same reason why my colleagues voted me into leadership, while I've been working on the city council on many of the big issues that face the city, what it comes down to is being able to listen to people, bring them together, and work towards a decision. Now, I may not agree with everybody. I may make things that are controversial decisions, but at the end of the day, I know the folks that I work with know that I've listened to them, I've made a thoughtful decision, and I've decided to move forward. That's leadership in my perspective. I hope that I thank you for being here tonight, and I encourage you one way or another to go out and vote on April 7th.
Thank you. Paul, your turn to finish it up for us.
4 years ago, the city of Madison was truly isolated in regards to what was happening in terms of the economy, in terms of equity throughout the United States. Since that time, we've taken a number of steps to change what's going on in our community. We've discussed a lot of it in the last hour, but I want to make the point that to make these things happen, there has to be the ability to bring together all the divergent interests within our community. And hey, when you're working with the 2nd Aldermanic District and the 2nd and the 6th Aldermanic Districts, I should say, the level of activism interjects a tremendous amount of disparate feelings and attitudes about the future. And it's the responsibility of the city staff and the elected officials to take that and to turn it into concrete results, whether it's the Central Park, or what's happening in Cap East, or the challenges we have on the northeast side and on the south side. It takes a leader who can make things happen and for the better, and who's willing to turn this into the #1 city, not just for entrepreneurs, not just for middle-class families, not just for the people who are the insiders, but to make it that city for everyone.
Thank you. And thank you to you both for your time and your thoughtful responses. I encourage everybody to go to each candidate's website if you have unanswered questions still running through your mind. And also, as Scott said, I encourage you all to vote on April 7th. So thank you very much. I know I've learned a lot and I appreciate your time.